Welcome again to everyone. Do we realize that the words deception or deceit or some form of these words are found over 140 times in the King James Bible? Of course, that's something Christ warned us about many times. It wasn't just Christ, his disciples warned us too. But despite the repeated warnings throughout the Bible, sadly, many Christians find themselves deceived today. I know we often talk about how many are deceived into abandoning the true worship of God and are turned to, well, frankly, pagan God worship and idolatry. But it's not just the way we worship. Deception can take many forms. But false prophets, false ministers have gone out into the world. Many of them prophesy falsely about our future. I'd like to look at some of these predictions or prophecies that have deceived many people. And many relate to the return of Jesus Christ. Others relate to sometimes catastrophic events that were about to happen on the earth. Well, let's take a look at some of this. I've got a few examples for you here. Excuse me. Pope Innocent III predicted that the world would end 666 years after the rise of Islam in 618 AD. That would be in 1284. Of course, it didn't happen. William Miller was a Baptist preacher who predicted Christ would return on the 21st of March, 1844. When that failed, he claimed he had made a miscalculation and revised the date of Christ's return to October of 1844. Of course, that didn't work either. Now, the Catholic Apostolic Church claimed that Jesus would return by the time the last of its 12 founding members died. The last member died in 1901. Jehovah's Witnesses predicted the end of the world would come in 1941. Herbert W. Armstrong in 1943, 1972, and 1975. We might pay special attention to these next two prophetic events, if you would. We'll be seeing them predicted again a little later in today's message. So, excuse me. Here's the first one. Jean Dixon predicted a planetary alignment on the 4th of February, 1962, that she said would bring destruction to the world. She predicted that the planets, all lining up together, would cause the Earth to be destroyed. She said the combined gravitational effect of the planets lining up together would cause large earthquakes, volcanoes, etc., on a massive scale, destroying the Earth. I'd like to comment about that. The sun can affect the Earth due to its massive size. And the moon is a little smaller than any planet, but it can have a great effect on the Earth because it's so close to us. The gravitational pull of the moon and the sun, to a lesser extent, are responsible for the ocean's tides. They do affect us. But the planets are nowhere near the size of the sun, and they're nowhere near as close as our moon. And the gravitational effect of the planets, even their combined effect, is completely negligible. That doesn't stop people from claiming that a planetary alignment will cause massive destruction on the Earth. They do it over and over again. We'll see that later. Now, speaking of predictions based on astronomy, David Berg predicted there would be a doomsday event. That would be the end of everything, I guess. A doomsday event caused by comet Holt in January of 1974. You remember that one? Anybody old enough? I do. Astronomers were expecting comet Holt to become very bright to the naked eye, and I was excited about this. I couldn't wait to see my first comet. But a comet's behavior can be very difficult to predict. And personally, I was never able to see this comet when it approached. It was somewhat of a dud. And of course, there was no effect on the Earth, and it didn't bring doomsday with it. That didn't happen. A couple more here. Hal Lindsey predicted Jesus would return 40 years after the founding of Israel in 1948. To him, a biblical generation. That would have been 1988. It didn't happen. I'd like to quote another one for you. I found this on Wikipedia. Quote, Edgar C. Wisenett was a former NASA engineer and Bible student who predicted the rapture would occur in 1988, sometime between September 11th and September 13th. He published 2 books about this, 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988, and On Borrowed Time. Eventually, 300,000 copies of 88 Reasons were mailed free of charge to ministers across America, and 4.5 million copies were sold in bookstores and elsewhere. Wozniak was quoted as saying, "Only if the Bible is in error am I wrong." And I say to every preacher in town, and if there were a king in this country and I could gamble with my life, I would stake my life on Rosh Hashanah 88. But he was wrong. Harold Camping predicted predicted a rapture at that time, the future date of the 21st of May, 2011, and the end of the world in that October. Ronald Wineland predicted the world would end in 2011, 2012, and then 2013. Then in 2018, predicted that Jesus would return on June 9th, 2019. And of course, there are many predictions still for dates still in our future. Now, while these false prophets mostly affect us spiritually in a negative way, you might say, sometimes following these false prophets has resulted in financial ruin. Harold Camping was not the only one to ask his followers to send in all the money they could get their hands on so they could use that money to warn the world about the impending end. After all, if you think about it, when Christ returned, the money would be of no value, especially if people believed we would be in heaven at Christ's return. So why hold on to the money, right? So if they believed that, they just got rid of their money. In fact, I personally know a man who mortgaged his house to generate some cash so that his false leader could get more money to warn the world about Christ's imminent return. Well, that's been about 20 years ago. And of course, Christ didn't return. So I suppose this man is probably still paying back his loan and possibly placing hardship on his family to do so. I don't know what his financial situation was, but that couldn't help anything. Well, when we truly believe that the world, or I should say the age, is coming to an end on a certain date, we typically fail to plan beyond that point. And if we're wrong, we can get ourselves into trouble. In addition to spiritual confusion, outright fear, and financial loss, following false prophets can even get us killed. You heard right. In March of 1997, Marshall Applewhite of the now infamous group Heaven's Gate, if you've heard of that, he predicted that the comet Hale-Bopp was more than just a comet. If his followers would commit suicide as the comet approached, their souls would reach a higher level. All 39 of them committed suicide. Every one of his followers died. They believed the words of a false prophet rather than their own Bibles. Here's a question for you. How many of us are familiar with the phrase, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid"? Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Have you heard that before? But do we know the origin of that phrase? Where did that come from? Did you ever wonder about that? Well, I'll just explain it real quick. Jim Jones founded the People's Temple Church in Indianapolis, Indiana, back in 1955. He had several visions, one of which was that a nuclear war or nuclear holocaust would take place in 1967. Of course, that failed, and other things failed too, but his followers continued to follow him anyway. They were following a man. Eventually, he was responsible for the deaths of over 900 of his followers in what is known today as the Jonestown Massacre. This was the single largest loss of U.S. civilian lives in a non-natural disaster until 9/11 came along. Members of this church followed Jones to a paradise he promised them in the jungle of Guyana. And to make a long story very short, accounts of people, including children who wanted to leave but weren't allowed to, surfaced. These got back to the States. Leo Ryan, who represented California's 11th Congressional District, decided to make a trip to Guyana and check things out. Well, Ryan was killed when he tried to leave. After that, others were told to drink a mixture of grape flavor aid laced with cyanide and some other nasty ingredients. There was allegedly some talk about reincarnation, which may have contributed to maybe a little opposition to drinking the poison. But a bigger reason not to avoid drinking the poison was they had armed guards there that ensured the people drank the flavor aid or they'd kill them anyway. We're going to have one way or the other, and most chose the flavor aid. The poison flavor aid, I might add. Now, although the people actually died from drinking poisoned Flavor Aid, people have used a more popular term, Kool-Aid. It's a similar product when they speak of it. It's the same thing, basically, just different brand. And so the Kool-Aid stuck as opposed to the actual Flavor Aid they actually drank. But the phrase, don't drink the Kool-Aid, came to mean not to follow these false prophets and teachers to our own destruction. But sadly, people still do, even today, despite the lessons of the past. In our present time, false prophets can turn us away from the true gospel. They can take our money, they can ruin us financially, and they can even cause us to lose our lives. It's incredible. So today, let's take a look at deception in the end times and how we might avoid being deceived like we know that so many others have in the past. So why are there false prophets and false teachers in the world today? Why are they here? I believe that some of these deceived leaders actually believe their flawed predictions will come true. They've made a mistake. They didn't get that. They didn't catch it. But I suspect many, if not most, instead do it for fame or for money, to get rich. Now, some use numerology to prove the timing of a future event. For example, I remember a false teaching from about 10 years ago. Since the two latest solar eclipses, total solar eclipses of the sun, cross the United States, and they occur about 7 years apart, the one before and the one coming up next month. They say the first eclipse marks the beginning of the Great Tribulation, and the next one, coming up in April, marks the return of Jesus Christ. Well, first, these two eclipses are not exactly 7 years apart. From August 2017 to April 2024 is 6 years, basically and a half, not 7 years. And also, we know now that the tribulation didn't begin in August 2017. So these numbers don't always work. Let me read an article, part of an article from BeliefNet.com, and this is regarding the use of numerology to predict the future, like many people do today. Quote, numbers in the Bible can often be taken literally, but they're sometimes used as symbols. Many scholars have used numerology to see patterns and codes in the Bible. Numerology attempts to explain the meaning of these numbers to see what God may be telling us by using them. However, nowhere are we taught to look for systems of numbers in the Scripture, much less told what those numbers signify. The Bible is supposed to be authoritative, yet when we start looking for numerical patterns, the best anyone is doing is guessing. The truth is, numerologists can find whatever they want in the Bible. The Bible is a huge book, and once someone begins adding up and dividing numbers, they're bound to find some types of patterns. This would happen with any long book, like a dictionary or an encyclopedia. If you look hard enough or manipulate the numbers well, patterns can be constructed anywhere. At this point, it really transforms us from being a student of the Bible to being a conspiracy theorist, end quote. And I can't tell you how many people have been able to put numbers together to prove something big is about to happen or prove Christ is returning, but it's never happened. They've been wrong every single time. So what are the odds that the next prediction based on numerology will be right? I'd say it's not so good. I had one excited person one time that told me that a man used numerology to prove the date of Christ's return several years ago. Of course, that's past. Well, numbers related to actual events in the Bible were used to prove that Christ would return on his birthday, December 25th. Now, December 25th is not found anywhere in the Bible. We know it's not Christ's birthday. Besides, Bible prophecy is based on God's calendar, and it doesn't match up to our Gregorian calendar we use today. Like I said, we can find and manipulate all kinds of numbers to prove just about anything. And there are some that do this for fame and fortune, albeit often short-lived. Although it turns out that many who predict dates, even though they're wrong, they actually gain a strong following. Because all this time we're waiting for this thing to come up, they can create an emotional attachment between themselves and their followers. And at that point, their followers will pretty much follow them anywhere, no matter what. They come to trust these false prophets more than the words of their own Bibles. These victims then place their trust in a man, often a charismatic leader, instead of God and His Holy Bible. Happens all the time. Romans, if you would, chapter 16, let's turn to Romans, chapter 16 and verse 17. That's Romans chapter 16, verse 17. And Paul warns us that there are people who will intentionally deceive us if we let them. Again, that's Romans chapter 16 and verse 17. All right, here's what he says. Now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which you have learned, and avoid them. For they that are such serve not our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by good words and fair speeches deceive the hearts of the simple. Simple meaning the innocent or the unsuspecting. And I would probably say that most of the false teachers and false prophets out there prey on the unsuspecting out of greed. They want to make money, of course, at the expense of others. Let's turn next to 2 Peter, if you would. That's 2 Peter, we'll to chapter 2, and go right there to verse 1. That's 2 Peter, chapter 2, and verse 1. So let's see here. Alan, are you saying there are false prophets and false teachers that actually fabricate stories? That they tell outright lies and even twist the scriptures just to take money from those that follow them? Would anybody do that? Let's see. 2 Peter 2, verse 1. But there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you. So right here we see that there are going to be false teachers among us. That's a fact, according to the Bible here. Who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. So again, our Bibles tell us that there will be false teachers among us today. I'll have an example of this in just a few minutes. I'll get right to that, but verse 2, 2 Peter 2, verse 2. And many shall follow their pernicious, meaning ruinous or destructive, ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be spoken evil of. So these false teachers will tell us what is true, what is actually right, is actually wrong. And they'll promote what is wrong, claiming it to be true, for their own personal gain. Verse 3. And through covetousness, I got that right that time, I think, shall they with vain words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingers not, and their damnation slumbers not. I'd like to reread that in the easy-to-read version. It says, these false teachers only want your money, so they will use you by telling you things that are not true. But the judgment against these false teachers has been already for a long time, and they will not escape God, who will destroy them. Now, those that preach and teach the Word of God can and have made what I call honest mistakes. No one's perfect. You know, sometimes the English Bible's hard to translate. And so anyway, there are people that in good faith do the best they can to teach us. But I believe in the very next verse, for example, 2 Peter 2, verse 4, that happened, and there's some disagreement. But again, people that are doing their best to teach us the Word of God, if they make an occasional mistake, they're human. Like I said, especially with the issues we find in the English translations of the Bible, it makes it difficult for us. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about teachers and preachers that are doing their very best to pray, be inspired, and read and teach from the Holy Word of God. There's a difference, though, between someone who's making a minor mistake in good faith, doing the best they can, and someone who is deliberately, intentionally fabricating lies for their own personal gain. That's a whole different ballgame. But that's why we should never believe anyone until we prove what is said to ourselves, and that includes everybody. Now, we can learn a great deal from our leaders that do their best to bring us truth, even if they do sometimes have the occasional human misunderstanding. But listening to those who would intentionally mislead us, well, that's a whole different matter. So today, we're talking about people. We're talking about ministers, teachers, YouTube content creators that intentionally tell lies to get our attention. They'll predict the Christ is coming back on a specific date without any real biblical support. They'll put together some numbers or something, but they will tell us something big is about to happen. They'll tell us anything. Worldwide nuclear war is coming next week, or a coming planetary alignment will cause a massive destruction all over the earth next month, or a comet will herald the destruction of the world. They tell us all kinds of these things. And they use fear to get our attention. They continue to draw us in with more of the same. It's fear. They often use numerology to predict the future, although, again, no one person has ever been successful with that. Still, people follow these made-up sensational stories rather than stick with what our Bibles actually teach us. I'd like to tell you about one self-proclaimed Bible teacher who is currently suggesting that we'll have many signs, many great signs from God in next month's sky. There's a great likelihood of great devastation coming to our planet next month. Does that get your attention? Great signs in the heavens next month and a great chance of fantastic devastation to the earth? I probably got my attention, right? Well, this particular Bible teacher currently has about 130,000 subscribers. He's produced many videos describing these great signs in the sky, allegedly signs from God. So I'd like to describe just one of this man's videos. So you may have seen it. This man begins by saying that something of earth-shaking importance is likely to happen in April 2024. Now that's next month. So what do you think? This man claims this is due to the signs he says will appear in the sky next month. He speaks of a total eclipse of the sun, which is of course true. There will be a total eclipse of the sun that will be visible from parts of the United States and other countries on April 8th of this year. But I think we already knew this. That's not really much of a surprise. It isn't exactly news. So what else does he claim in his video? Well, he claims that a comet is approaching the sun. He says, quote, "A comet with two horns, like Satan," close quote. Now, comets are made up of frozen water or ice, and when they approach the sun, the ice heats up, evaporating into water vapor. This water vapor forms a bit of a cloud around the comet's nucleus. Gives it the appearance of a fuzzy ball. I've seen these before. Back in 2023, this particular comet, as it heated, had an outgassing, which isn't uncommon. The solar wind blew this outgassing away from the sun. This resulted in the comet's horseshoe shape, if you will, as viewed from the Earth, as it blew that gas around behind it. Now, the two ends of the horseshoe, if you want to call it that, which seem to stick out away from the sun, are said to represent the devil's horns. Now, here's an image of this comet along with its devil horns. You can see it on your screen right now. So, do we all see the devil's horns in this picture? I'm afraid all I see is a comet reacting to being warmed by the sun. That's all I can make out of it. Not only that, but this man claims this devil comet will make its closest approach to the sun and be most visible the day before Passover this year. Not on Passover, but the day before. Is this significant? Well, apparently this is supposedly some sign from God. Or might it be from Satan, since this Bible teacher calls this the devil comet? Well, anyway, should we be afraid of this ominous sign of a devil comet in our sky that will dominate our sky during Passover this year? Well, I'd like to ask you a question. I want you to answer it really quickly to yourself. Don't think, just answer quickly and just to yourself. Here we go. You ready? How many horns does Satan have? How many horns does Satan have? What do you think? I'm betting most people will likely say Satan has two horns. That's what everybody usually says. I don't know about you, but if you would turn to Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 13. Ezekiel chapter 28, and we'll go to verse 13. Ezekiel 28, 13. So where do we get the idea that Satan has two horns? Is Satan described in the Bible as having two horns? is he described at all. Ezekiel 28, verse 13. It starts out, "You have been in Eden, the garden of God." Let's stop here for a minute. Who's God addressing here? Who's he speaking to or about? Who was in Eden, the garden of God? Well, there was Adam, there was Eve. What about God? Well, yes, God was there, but I don't think it's likely that God was talking to himself here. There's one more possibility. Who is it? What's that? The serpent. Satan. Satan is my Satan. So do the following verses I'm about to read describe Adam, Eve, or Satan, or even God? Let's see. Again, who is being described in Ezekiel 28, verse 13? Let's read it again. Whoever it is, you have been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, the sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of your tabrets, and of your pipes was prepared in you in the day that you were created. Look at verse 14. You are the anointed cherub, or cherub that covers. And I've set you so. You were upon the holy mountain of God. You walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways, from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you. Now, I believe this is speaking of Satan. I don't believe Adam and Eve were ever cherubs. But Satan was an angel, right? He was a cherub. A very powerful angelic being that ultimately turned against God. What does a cherub look like? Well, we can see a description of the cherubim in Ezekiel chapter 10. We won't go there today. You might want to look it up later. But there in the description, you'll find no horns. How many of us have seen an artist's description of the Ark of the Covenant? Okay. When we see that artist's rendition of the Ark of the Covenant, there are two cherubs or cherubim with their wings pointing toward each other. Y'all seen that? Now, these artists created these cherubim based on their description in the Bible. But again, there are no horns. Turn to Revelation chapter 12, if you would. Revelation chapter 12, verse 3. Revelation chapter 12 and verse 3. Now, there are a specific number of horns that some believe are associated with Satan. Now, I believe these horns are representing something other than physical horns. But if we insist they're describing Satan's appearance, how many horns are there in Revelation 12, verse 3? Let's take a look. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, not 2, 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. Now, this great red dragon may well represent Satan. But again, I think this is figurative. I think it's literal. But if it's literal, even still, the number of horns mentioned is not 2, it's 10. There is a place in Revelation 13:11 I'll read to you. It says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Now, first, was this Satan that's being described? And even if it is, does this verse actually describe Satan's appearance? Or do those 2 horns represent something else? I'm not sure if anyone really knows where a devil with 2 horns, a pointed tail, and a pitchfork comes from. Do we know? I mean, it's not in the Bible. Well, the horns may have just come from the Greek god Pan, who Christians were rejecting as the devil at one time. They saw him as the devil. He was an evil. He was a pagan entity. And what we call a pitchfork actually isn't a pitchfork. It's actually a bident. Did I say that right? No, it's a bident. It's not a trident. It's a bident. That's what the research shows. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll show you a picture in a minute here. But first, from the website, alicia.org, quote, one of the largest influences of the modern depiction of Satan is the Greek god Pan. He was known as a god of the wilderness, and many stories associate him with lust. Christians saw all pagan deities as incarnations of the devil, but Pan's sinful activities and grotesque goat-footed appearance made him a perfect symbol. Now, Here on your screens is a depiction of Pan, which is based on Roman mythology. Of course, notice the two horns. And this is pretty much the people's idea today of what Satan looks like. But it comes nowhere near close to matching what we read about if we take a look back in Ezekiel. Notice the two horns. Okay. From the same article regarding the pitchfork. Okay, pitchfork. It says, quote, also known as a bident, the pitchfork-like staff was used by the Greek god of the underworld, Hades, and represented his sovereignty over the dead. Since Satan is viewed as the Lord of hell, he is frequently depicted with a bident. So now on your screen is an image of a bident, often called a pitchfork due to its close resemblance. And here's the picture. Take a look at that. That would be a bident. Now, the appearance of Satan that comes to mind for most of us likely comes from the pagan god Pan, with two horns and holding a pitchfork, or actually a bident. This bident represented his sovereignty over the dead since he was ruler in hell. But of course, we know there's no hell today. Remember, this is Greek mythology, not biblical truth. But anyway, this Bible teacher is counting on us believing that Satan has two horns, as most of us believe. He's counting on that. Rather than, of course, an actual biblical description of a cherub, which we just saw is the type of angel that Satan actually was, or is. Now, this man also claims this comet will be most visible on the day before Passover. So like, wow, here's Passover, and look at this big sign in the sky. Well, it's true that on the 21st of April, the comet will make its closest approach to the sun. He's right about that. But there's a problem. All astronomers know that when comets get near the sun, they're not at their most visible like he claims. In fact, at their closest approach to the sun, comets can't be seen at all. Their relatively weak reflected light is lost in the glare of the bright sun. They're just too close to it. We cannot see it. So no one is going to even see this devil comet in the sky on Passover or the night before, as he claims. That's not true. It's simply not true. Now, will it be possible to see this comet during the eclipse? The sun won't be seen then, right? The moon will obscure it. So yes, it might be possible to catch a glimpse of this comet if we're in the path of totality. With the bright sun shielded from view by the moon, the comet might be visible to the naked eye. But even then, many astronomers are suspecting that binoculars might be needed to see it. We don't know how bright it's going to be. They don't think it's going to be all that bright. But a comet's brightness is very difficult to predict, like Comet Kohoutek. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Anyway, so this man claims that this is a devil comet because he sees a horseshoe shape on photographs and declares that the ends of the horseshoe are the two horns of Satan, even though our Bibles don't tell us that Satan has two horns. Further, that idea likely comes from mythology. He clearly states that the time the comet will be most visible will be the day before Passover, even though we know the comet will be completely invisible to us at this time. So these things simply are not true. But that's not the worst of it yet. Things are going to get worse. Well, here we go. This man also claims there will be a planetary alignment that will likely cause destruction over all the earth next month. He said, and let me quote to make sure we're clear. I have his actual words here. Let me tell you what he says. Let me quote this. Quote, all the known planets are going to line up in a straight line on one side of the sun. God is going to darken the sun so that everyone in the path of the total eclipse can see all the known planets in a straight line across the sky. Lining up the planets like this on one side of the sun can create some gravitational effects on the earth. Where have we heard that before? I'm sorry, back to the quote. That pull of the planets is always a time of increased volcanic and geologic activity when it happens. It has long been theorized that the New Madrid fault line will be involved somehow. Close quote. Now, is that scary? We've got a perfect alignment of the sun. It's likely to cause some gravitational effects. In fact, it sounds like the New Madrid fault may erupt, or not erupt, but we have an earthquake there. And we're going to have volcanic and the volcanic and geologic activity when it happens. So again, is that scary or what? Along with the devil comment. Okay. Now, this man's suggesting, or actually saying, that all the planets will be perfectly lined up in a perfectly straight line. Perfectly. Let me put a picture up to show you what he's talking about. Okay, you can see it on your screen now. See this perfectly straight line, and he suggests that this can have gravitational effects on the Earth, resulting in volcanoes, earthquakes, and specifically earthquakes on the New Madrid Fault. Doesn't that get our attention? Okay. Well, it gets our attention because this is all purposely designed to get our attention. It's designed to create fear. So we'll be glued to his YouTube channel to hear more about this coming destruction. An approaching devil comet, a planetary alignment that will likely cause worldwide destruction. It appears this man has captured the attention of at least 130,000 people who want to learn about these foreboding signs that are about to appear in the heavens and appearing next month too. Should we be worried? Should we be afraid? Should we keep watching more of this man's videos? He has many others similar to this one. But one very important question we should ask ourselves simply is this man teaching truth? Let's take a look at his claims. First off, the planets will not, I repeat, not be in a perfect line as he claims. Look at the graphic here. Hopefully you can see it. It shows the planet's actual positions at the time of the eclipse. So here's the first one. If you can see this, you'll see the Earth is to the left. Mercury is on our side of the sun. Now, Venus and Mars are not in a straight line. Take a look at that. You can see that. If we back out a little, we can see that Jupiter and Neptune don't come close to making a straight line either. Now, here's the thing. A planetary alignment simply means that all the planets will be on the same side of the sun, but they'll be all spread out, not in a straight line as he says. So if you're looking, you won't look down your arm and go, there's all the planets. They're going to be more like this. Planets over here, all the way across the sky, but on the same side of the sun. Now, if you notice my graphic there, you saw that Mercury, the innermost planet, will actually quickly move around to the other side of the sun to form a planetary alignment days after the eclipse. It moves very quickly. So it wasn't actually an alignment going on in that first graphic, but that'll happen days after this. But now the other planets move very slowly compared to Mercury, and they never align in a perfectly straight line with each other. It's not going to happen now. It never happens. It's just one thing, their planes don't match up. They're not perfect. So they'll never, ever, ever be in a straight line. So that's simply not true. So again, if we're looking for planets, in fact, if you go to the eclipse, if you look up and to the left, don't look at the sun, but if you look up at the eclipse sun, to your left is going to be Jupiter. To the right will be Venus. That's right, Jupiter, Venus. I think they're separated by, don't quote me, I think 33 degrees. But the whole thing is, the whole planetary alignment is not much of an alignment, okay? Anyway, what he's saying about lining up perfectly never happens, not this time either. But will there be increased gravitational effects on the Earth that result in increased volcanic and geologic activity, such as earthquakes? He specifically mentioned which one? The New Madrid Fault. Don't forget about that, okay? So I said earlier, the planets have nowhere near the gravitational effect of our sun and moon. And if you think about it for a minute, if all the planets are on the other side of the sun, they're away from us, there'll be less gravitational effect on the Earth because they're farther away. If there was going to be a gravitational effect, and there's not, but if there was, it would be when they're on our side, right? When they're closer to us. So this doesn't make any sense. But this same idea of a planetary alignment causing Earth chaos has been used several times before. This isn't the first time. This always excites people, but it's never true, and we should know that by now. This fake science and sensationalism actually sold a lot of books back in the 70s. Does anybody remember that? I'd like to quote an article located at mentalfloss.com/article/76906. Quote, on March 10th, 1982, a certain facet of people were bracing for a series of global disasters, earthquakes, tidal waves, violent storms, that they believed would be caused by an alignment of all the 9 planets. The alignment was real, but the fear of a natural disaster takeover wasn't coming from NASA or world governments. It had all come from the 1974 bestseller called The Jupiter Effect. Penned by British astrophysicist and science writer John Griven, along with astronomer Stephen Flegman, the Jupiter Effect predicted utter devastation. Astronomers had long known about the rare planetary alignments set to occur around that date, but the event wasn't expected to have much of an effect on Earth. Actually, no effect. After all, the same thing had occurred every 179 years and would continue to do so, and no catastrophic events had happened in the past. Still, Gribbin and Plegman asserted that when all the planets lined up on one side of the sun, lined up being a generous phrasing, the planets would be within a 95-degree arc from the sun. Lined up being a generous phrasing, the planets would be within a 95-degree arc from the sun, not in a straight line. The gravitational pull would trigger sunspots, solar winds, and an increase in Earth's rotation that would lead to natural catastrophes, the most ruinous of which would be a Los Angeles leveling earthquake along the San Andreas Fault. Does that sound familiar? Now, this planetary alignment causing major disruptions on the Earth, this myth has been around for a long time. It comes back over and over again. Again, a planetary alignment just simply means the planets are just on the same side of the sun. But some decide for themselves that this means a perfect straight line alignment. They don't understand astronomy. But this won't be occurring at the time of the upcoming eclipse or any other time. But I found it interesting that the book, The Jupiter Effect, suggested not only earthquakes and other disasters caused by this alignment, but they specifically mentioned the San Andreas Fault. Now, this man also listed a major area to be concerned about. This time it was the New Madrid Fault. Same false science, just a different earthquake zone this time. He did manage to change that. We know this isn't true. This happened before. It happened back in 1982. Maybe the guy's not very old. I don't know. But why would this man say so many things that simply are not true? Why would he do this? Why would he make so many videos? Well, maybe I shouldn't say, but I think most likely to make merchandise of us. The more we watch this man, the more he makes from the commercials when we see or view his videos. And that's likely why they seem to be stretched out in length. It takes him a while to explain this, and also why there are so many of them. Because the longer people watch, the more money he makes. Now we might say, well, that's okay, because he's not taking any money directly from me. Although he might be getting donations from some deceived people who think he's doing some kind of good work. But he is taking something from us. For one thing, he's taking our precious time. I know people who've spent hours watching this man's videos, one after the other. I believe time that we better spent studying our Bibles or listening to a Bible teacher who's actually teaching the truth and not things that are obviously lies. And think about this. After watching all these videos, what have we actually learned? What did we learn from this, all the time we spent? Well, I guess with the one video, we learned that there's a fast approaching devil comet and a planetary alignment, and they're warning us of great destruction coming all over the world next month, either during the eclipse or possibly at Passover. Well, I believe when May arrives, many will realize they wasted several hours on these false teachings, time that could have been spent better. Now, as far as signs in the heavens go, Jesus did tell us there would be signs in the heavens and that we should watch. I'm agreeing with that. In fact, I do believe that one of the signs we've been looking for, Christ told us to look for in Luke chapter 21. I also believe it appears, okay. Get me right, okay, do it again. Okay, I do believe that one of the signs we're looking for, Christ told us to look for in Luke chapter 21. And it also appeared, I believe, just as described by John in Revelation 12. So there's a sign, but we have something in the Bible that tells us it's a sign. We're not guessing. But we can't just make up our own signs from God. We can't just look up and say, look at that great, it's a meteor shower, wow, or it's a bright comet, look at that. We can't just look at these things and say, it's a sign from God. These things happen. But unless our Bibles tell us in concise terms, these kinds of signs are no more than human speculation, and I'd say very often, very poor speculation. Now, I don't mind speculation at times, don't get me wrong. I don't want to condemn that. Sometimes speculating might lead us to something that's true. But we can't take human speculation and come to actually believe it until we have solid proof, until we've really proven it to ourselves. And we can't just believe unsubstantiated claims from false teachers. We cannot do that. I would ask us to check with those that believed and trusted Marshall Applewhite or Jim Jones, but we know they're not around anymore. They're all dead. We need to be very careful to prove everything that is said by anyone. There are a lot of people out there ready to deceive us. Turn to Deuteronomy 18, verse 20. I'm going to get a drink. Deuteronomy 18, verse 20. It's Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 20. Now, I'll give this man credit. He does cleverly say over and over that this might likely happen, could happen, but it seems to be more than that. His message is that these things are very likely to happen, so we need to keep watching him and making him rich. But what do our Bibles say about prophets or Bible teachers that do not speak his words and do not tell the truth? Again, Deuteronomy 18, verse 20. It says, but the prophet, and that would include anyone who's speaking for God or about what God might be doing. That's still a prophet. We shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or they shall speak in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. If you say in your heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? Okay, verse 32. When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, the thing follow not, nor come to pass, then is the thing which the Lord said, Lord has not spoken, but the prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You shall not be afraid of him. So if somebody speaks presumptuously, nothing God told him, and it follows not, it doesn't happen, then we should not be afraid of them. Now, the man in my example is saying things that are not true. There is no devil comet. The comet that will be around in April will not be visible on Passover Day or the day before, as he states. There will be no massive global destruction next month due to a planetary alignment. And we could wait for May, but we don't have to. We already know his words are not true. They're just not. They don't make any sense. They're not good science even. This Bible teacher has warned us that something very bad may be coming in April, but he has no basis in doing so, certainly not from God, and not even from science. So how should we react to his videos? Well, the King James tells us not to be afraid of him, although he obviously wants to scare us, so we'll continue to follow him and watch more of his videos. That's his point. The word afraid is gur in the original Hebrew. According to Strong's Bible Dictionary, it also means abide, assemble, dwell, gather, or remain. And so, since his Bible teacher has proven himself to be false, we should not continue to abide, assemble, dwell, or remain with him. I guess that means no more videos. But anyway, 2 Timothy 4, verse 3. If you would, 2 Timothy 4, verse 3. 2 Timothy 4, verse 3. It's kind of human nature to always want to know what our future holds. And many look to their leaders to explain Bible prophecy to them. The leaders, study this and maybe ahead of some of us. And sometimes people speculate about the future, but we need to be careful that speculation doesn't become fact to us. We've got to be careful of that. But many of us do want to know the future. We might say, I know many of us have itching ears, and there are always those who are ready and willing to scratch them. 2 Timothy 4, verse 3. I think this time's already come. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth and be turned into fables. I like to add fables like devil comets and massive destruction coming next month. Fables. Matthew 7, if you would. That's Matthew chapter 7 and verse 15. That's Matthew chapter 7 and verse 15. So whether it's Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, a devil comet, or a planetary alignment that might create worldwide destruction, especially for those who live near the new matter fault, like we do, all are simply deception. All lead us away from the truth of God and the real prophecies found in our Bibles, that instead we might believe a lie. Matthew 7 and verse 15. These are the words of Jesus Christ, by the way. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. These false teachers come to us promising to help us, to warn us of a disaster maybe, but instead they use their deception to their advantage. In some cases, they take away our money. They definitely take away our time. They can take away our truth. And we saw that sometimes they end up even taking away our very lives. That's how serious it can be. Turn next to Matthew 24:24, if you would. We got a couple of scriptures here. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 24. So we should be expecting these false prophets, these false teachers, especially in the latter days. This is what Christ and his disciples warned us about, so we really shouldn't be surprised. Matthew 24:24. Again, here Jesus tells us, "For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they would deceive the very elect." Well, that's some deception here, folks. Verse 25, "Behold, I have told you before." We've been warned. Christ warned us that the deception we'd see in the last day, that these false prophets would become very convincing. When the disciples asked Christ about the end of the age, it was the very first thing he warned them and us about. Today, I think we've seen what I believe to be just one example of a false teacher. But we've seen that it's very easy to disprove many of the things this man claims to be true, if we take the time to check out what's said, just as the Bereans did, whether by the Bible or even science. But, here's the but. If we can't see through obvious deception today, what does that mean for us in the future? Think about that. Revelation 13. Let's turn to Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. That's Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. Revelation 13:11. So, I'd like to say this. For those of us who've been called and have God's Holy Spirit, for those of us who have had our eyes opened to the truth of our Bibles and to all manner of Satan's as well as man's deceptions, if we've been given this gift, if we then fail to recognize these easily disproven deceptions we're seeing in the world today that Christ warned us about, we're going to be in some real serious trouble when the real deception comes. We haven't seen anything yet. And when that comes, if we're not doing it today, we won't stand a chance. In Revelation 13:11. Now, we might want to focus on this section of Scripture when we have time, but we're running a little low on time today, so I'll be brief, but you'll get the point. Revelation 13, verse 11. "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." Again, I don't think this is a literal description of Satan's appearance, but let's go ahead in verse 12. "And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." Verse 13. "And he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceives them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image of the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the beast, the image of the beast, should be killed. Now, here is some really big-time deception. I mean, this is off the charts. So, if we don't take the time, if we don't see the obvious deception in the world today, I think we'll likely be easily deceived when this happens. This is really going to take some real discernment. Verse 16. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Now, I know what we're probably saying. I would never take the mark of the beast. And it looks like it's pretty obvious, but is it possible? Is it possible? Some of us may have assumed that we know exactly what the mark of the beast is. It looks like it's plain, but do we know? Is it possible that some of us have turned our speculation into fact as far as we're concerned? But if we're looking to avoid the wrong mark, will we possibly not recognize the real mark of the beast when it finally does arrive? Well, I don't know. And maybe this doesn't apply to all of us, but I think you get my point. We need to be careful and not be deceived by anything, but make sure we prove everything. In fact, back to our false teachers, let's go to 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 20. To my point, that's 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 20. Now, just in case, am I trying to say that we should never listen to a Bible teacher ever again on YouTube or anywhere else? Am I saying don't do it? Not at all. Again, 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 20. In fact, we read here, despise not prophesying. The word prophesying here is prophetia. Thayer's definition is prophecy, a discourse emanating from divine inspiration and declaring the purposes of God, whether by reproving and admonishing the wicked or comforting the afflicted or revealing things hidden, especially by foretelling future events. So, nothing wrong with listening to somebody that tells us from the Bible what's going on, but we've got to make sure they're real. Verse 21. And this backs us up again. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good. We talk about that all the time. So whether it's Jesus Christ returning on a certain date or a cataclysm is going to occur next week, we've got to prove what's said. And hold fast only that which is good. And if what we prove is a person calling themselves a prophet, a Bible teacher, a pastor, a minister, or anyone else for that matter, if we prove they're not speaking the truth, what do we do? Well, as we read earlier in Deuteronomy 18, verse 22, we shouldn't be afraid of them. We should not continue to abide, assemble, dwell, or remain with them. And after all, what would be the point if we're seeking truth and righteousness and we already know the person's not telling us the truth? You need to be a light shining on the hill to others. We've seen that, but verse 22 tells us to abstain from all appearance of evil. Now, we need to look at these videos or whatever these teachings are and determine if they're okay or not. Because if we're going to recommend these false teachers to others to learn from, are we giving the appearance of evil, even endorsing it? If we know this person's wrong and we tell people to watch it anyway. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to ask someone else to take a look at a video or any other kind of teaching if they're seeking their wisdom as to whether this person is speaking truth. You might want to say, hey, look at this video. See what you make of it. I'm not saying it's true. I just want to know what you think because I'm concerned. No problem with that. In fact, I would encourage that. If you're not sure, ask for some help. Talk to the brethren. That's what we're all here for, right? Iron sharpens iron. So in that case, getting a second opinion would be wise, I would say. But recommending, and obviously, that we know deceptive teaching is a valid one, well, that would be wrong. That would be giving the appearance of evil, I believe. 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. I'm going to make one more point here as we get to wrap this up. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. There's one last point I'd like to make. Now, most of the deceivers today rely on sensationalism and fear to keep us interested and keep us coming back. The earth's going to be destroyed in a month. That gets our attention. It gives us fear. That's why we come back. So my question is fear something from God, or is it from the enemy? Again, 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. It tells us, for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So we need to use the minds God gave us to discern and rightly divide the word of truth. God's about love. He's not about fear-mongering and making us afraid. God wants to comfort us, not scare us. He reminds us that He is there for us. We shouldn't be afraid, as many today want us to become, for their own purposes, not for God's. But to that end, let me read a few scriptures to you. I'll just read these. These are not about fear. Isaiah 41:13. For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not. I am the one who helps you. That was the English Standard Version, by the way. Back to the King James, Joshua 1 verse 9. Have not I commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. And one last one. Psalm 34:4. Good advice. I sought the Lord, and He answered me and delivered me from all my fears. That's God. That's not a false prophet. To conclude, there are those that would deceive us. It's not just Satan, but all those around us. False teachers in the churches, on YouTube, they're everywhere today. Whether to deceive themselves or they're intending to make merchandise out of us by using lies and deliberate deception, we must not allow ourselves or others to become deceived. We can't afford it, especially with what's coming. So let's turn to Philippians 4, verse 4 to end today. At least come close to it. That's Philippians 4, verse 4. So we see that people will try to create fear to get us to listen to them, to get our attention. But we should all know that God gives us not fear, but a sound mind. Let's dwell on the love and all the good things of God and ignore those that would cause us to fear and have anxiety with lies, deceptions, false prophecies, and anything else they can use to make us afraid. Again, Philippians 4, verse 4. Yet more excellent advice from the Apostle Paul. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say, rejoice. Not fear, but rejoice. This is the English Standard Version, by the way. We're not to fear, but rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. We need to always be reasonable, to think for ourselves, and not be blown around by the winds of doctrines or any false teaching. Reasonable. Check it out. Verse 6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true. Now, this is whatever is true, not false. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable. If there's any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. These things. So let's not spend our precious time with Bible teachers who we should know are deceiving us. They're making merchandise out of us for their own personal gain. Now let's continue. Let's continue to work hard to prove all things. Let's do our very best to avoid the deception that permeates our world today. We need to get good at it, because I believe we've not seen anything yet. So we need to get ready. Now, Jeremiah 12, verse 5 warns us, if we run with the footmen and they worried us, then how can we contend with horses? So please, brothers and sisters, be careful. Don't let others deceive us, as Christ warned us about. As Paul said in Romans 16, verse 18, for they that are such, serve not our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by good words and fair speeches deceive the hearts of the simple.